When Realtor Caroline Bennett steers a black family toward cheap neighborhoods, she never suspects the neurosurgeon and tech executive could buy her entire portfolio with their $8.5 million net worth. Dr. James Robinson adjusted his tie as he gazed out the hotel window at the rolling hills of the suburb they hoped to call home. After 14 years building his reputation at Chicago Memorial, the offer to become chief of neurosurgery at Oakwood Medical Center represented the pinnacle of his career. He'd performed surgeries that made medical journals, saved lives deemed unsavable, and now looked forward to leading a department at one of the country's most prestigious hospitals. The realtor called back, Melissa said, looking up from her laptop where spreadsheets and projections for her tech company's latest product launch filled the screen. As Chief Innovation Officer at Nexus Technologies, she had negotiated a flexible remote work arrangement that would allow her to relocate without stepping away from the company she'd helped build into a market leader. And, James asked, turning, from the window, she sounds excited to work with us. Said our budget puts us in elite territory, her words. She's clearing her schedule to meet us tomorrow morning. Zoe looked up from her book, her expression cautiously optimistic. So we might find our house this weekend. If Caroline Bennett is as good as her reputation suggests, James replied with a smile. She's apparently sold more luxury homes in Oakwood Heights than anyone else in the past decade. The following morning, the Robinsons arrived at the elegant Office of Prestige Properties precisely on time. The receptionist directed them to a seating area adorned with framed photographs of magnificent homes. Homes the Robinsons could easily afford with their $2.5 million budget. When Caroline Bennett emerged from her office, her smile faltered for just a fraction of a second as she took in the family waiting for her. She recovered quickly, extending a manicured hand. The Robinsons, I presume? I'm Caroline Bennett. We spoke yesterday. Dr. James Robinson, James said, shaking her hand firmly. This is my wife, Melissa, and our daughter Zoe. Lovely to meet. You all, Caroline replied, her voice noticeably cooler than it had been during their enthusiastic phone conversation. She glanced down at her tablet. Now, you mentioned relocating from Chicago for a job at the hospital, was it? Chief of neurosurgery, James clarified. How nice, Caroline said with a thin smile before turning to Melissa. And you'll be looking for something in the area as well? I'm continuing as Chief Innovation Officer at Nexus Technologies, Melissa explained. I'll be working remotely, with monthly trips to headquarters. I see. Caroline nodded, but something in her expression had shifted. Well, I've pulled some listings based on our conversation. Let's start by getting you familiar with the different neighborhoods. 2 hours later, the Robinsons sat in the back of Caroline's luxury SUV, exchanging glances as she drove them through a neighborhood clearly below their stated price range. The homes, while perfectly respectable, were nowhere near the caliber they had discussed. This area is much more diverse, Caroline emphasized, as if offering them a rare gift. The homes typically sell in the $800,000 to $1.2 million range, which gives you plenty of room to customize or perhaps invest the difference. James leaned forward slightly. We were actually hoping to see properties in Oakwood Heights proper, ideally near the lake. Our budget allows for it. Oh, those neighborhoods can be very competitive, Caroline replied instantly. The residents there have established certain community standards. I'm just not sure it would be the right fit for your family. The implication hung in the air, unmistakable in its meaning. As they pulled up to a modest colonial priced nearly $1 million below their budget, Melissa reached for James's hand and squeezed it, a silent acknowledgement of what was happening. They'd been here before, in college admissions interviews, at hospital galas, in corporate boardrooms. The polite redirection, the subtle questioning of credentials, the assumptions about what they could afford or achieve. Later that evening, in the privacy of their hotel suite, the conversation that had been simmering all day finally surfaced. "She didn't show us a single house in our actual price range," Melissa said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Not one," James agreed, loosening his tie with a sharp tug. "And did you notice how she kept emphasizing which neighborhoods were welcoming to everyone?" Zoe looked up from her homework, her young face carrying the weary knowledge of someone who had witnessed this pattern before. "So what do we do? Find another realtor?" Her parents exchanged a look, the look of two professionals who had climbed to the pinnacles of their fields despite barriers, who had learned when to fight and when to strategize. "We could," James said slowly. "Or we could help Ms. Bennett understand exactly who she's dealing with." The Robinsons' second day of house hunting with Caroline began with renewed hope. Perhaps yesterday had been a misunderstanding, a poor interpretation of their needs. But as the morning progressed, a disturbing pattern emerged with unmistakable clarity. "I'd actually love to see the lakeside property on Willow Avenue," James mentioned casually, referencing a stunning contemporary home he'd found online that matched their preferences perfectly. Caroline's smile remained fixed, but her eyes flickered momentarily. "Oh, I checked on that one this morning. It just went under contract yesterday. Such a shame." Melissa made a mental note. She'd contacted the listing agent directly last night, confirming the property was still very much available. At the third, modest home of the day, a perfectly respectable colonial but dramatically below their specified requirements, Caroline lingered for nearly an hour, pointing out every feature from the updated kitchen to the cozy bedrooms that would barely fit their furniture. "The schools in this neighborhood are quite decent," Caroline emphasized. "Not quite Lakeside Academy quality, but certainly adequate for most families." 30 minutes later, they finally convinced Caroline to show them a property actually within their price range. The difference in her demeanor was striking. She rushed them through the elegant rooms of the lakefront property, brushing off questions about the home theater and wine cellar. "This is more of what we had in mind," Melissa remarked, admiring the gourmet kitchen. "The down payment would be substantial, of course," Caroline replied, her tone suggesting doubt. "Properties in this neighborhood typically require at least 30% down to be competitive." "That won't be a problem," Melissa stated firmly. "We're prepared to put down 50%. Caroline's eyebrows lifted slightly before she quickly directed them toward the exit. "Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. There are several more neighborhoods I think would be more suitable." While exploring the backyard of a particularly impressive property, James stepped around the corner to admire the landscaping. He froze when he overheard Caroline speaking with a neighbor who had wandered over. "They're just looking," Caroline assured the woman quietly. "Honestly, between us, I don't think they'll end up in this neighborhood." That afternoon, while touring yet another mid-range property, Caroline pulled Zoe aside while her parents examined the primary bedroom. "You know," she said in what she probably thought was a helpful tone, "some of these more established neighborhoods can be difficult for people who are different to really fit into. The social dynamics at the schools are very entrenched. I'm just thinking about what would be comfortable for you." Zoe, with the composure of someone who had navigated these waters before despite her young age, simply replied, "I typically find my place just fine, Ms. Bennett." Later that evening, the frustration in their hotel suite was palpable. "I'm done with this," James said, pacing the room. "We should call her out directly and find another agent." Melissa shook her head, her expression calculating rather than defeated. That's exactly what she expects. Then she can tell herself we were difficult and feel justified. What's the alternative? James asked. Allow her to keep disrespecting us? No, Melissa replied, her tone shifting from frustration to determination. We make her confront her own prejudice in a way she can't possibly deny or explain away. Melissa Robinson hadn't become a C-suite executive by being unprepared. While James took Zoe shopping the next morning, she sat in the hotel business center, compiling research with methodical precision. Caroline Bennett's sales history was publicly available through county records. Over the past 5 years, she had sold 47 homes in Oakwood Heights proper. Not a single one had been sold to a black family. Diverse buyers were invariably directed to the surrounding, less prestigious neighborhoods, exactly as the Robinsons were experiencing. A pattern of online reviews revealed subtle disparities in how Caroline treated different clients. While most reviews were positive, there were occasional references to feeling steered toward certain areas or finding better options after switching. Agents. Through a local forum, Melissa connected with another black family, the Washingtons, who had eventually purchased land in the prestigious lakeside neighborhood. Their experience with Caroline had been nearly identical, but they'd ultimately worked with another agent. We should have reported her, Dr. Washington admitted during their phone call. But we just wanted to find our home and move on. Armed with this information, the Robinsons agreed to give Caroline one more day to demonstrate good faith. It did not go well. At each property, Caroline skillfully redirected conversations whenever James or Melissa mentioned their professional backgrounds. When James casually referenced his department's $12 million research budget, Caroline nodded politely before immediately pointing out the practical storage space in the garage. The most revealing moment came during an open house for a stunning lakeside property. The Robinsons arrived to find several other prospective buyers touring the home. Caroline immediately approached a white couple, engaging them warmly. The Millers are serious buyers from New York, she explained to the seller who was present. Then, gesturing vaguely toward the Robinsons, she added, and these clients are still exploring their options in the area. On the drive to the final property of the day, yet another mid-range home, Caroline remarked cheerfully, I think this one will be perfect for your budget and needs. The property was listed at $950,000, exactly $1 million below what they had repeatedly stated they could afford. Throughout the weekend, Melissa had discreetly documented each incident, recording conversations when legal, saving emails, taking screenshots of listings Caroline claimed were unavailable. The evidence painted an undeniable picture of discrimination, but the Robinsons maintained their composed, professional demeanor through every interaction. This isn't just about us finding a house anymore, James told Zoe as they reviewed their experiences. It's about making sure she doesn't do this to the next family that looks like us. On Sunday evening, the Robinsons gathered around the hotel room table to develop their strategy. Rather than an emotional confrontation that could be dismissed, they would create a situation where Caroline would have to face her bias with incontrovertible evidence. We need to demonstrate the differential treatment definitively, Melissa explained, outlining her approach with the precision she typically applied to corporate strategy. Their plan began with Dr. William Chen, James's colleague who had helped recruit him to Oakwood Medical Center. Dr. Chen, who was white, agreed to contact Caroline about properties in the exact same price range and neighborhoods as the Robinsons. Ask specifically about the Willow Avenue property she told us was under contract, James instructed. Within hours, Dr. Chen had not only received an enthusiastic response from Caroline, but had been scheduled for a private viewing of the supposedly unavailable property. Meanwhile, Melissa assembled a comprehensive financial portfolio that went far beyond what typical buyers would provide at this stage. Bank statements showing their substantial assets, investment portfolios, credit reports reflecting their perfect scores, and verification of both their incomes. "We shouldn't have to prove ourselves this way," she told James as she organized the documents, "but we're going to make it impossible for her to dismiss us." The most daring part of their plan involved directly contacting the sellers of 142 Lakeshore Drive, a breathtaking contemporary home that had everything they wanted, but that Caroline had repeatedly refused to show them, claiming it was not on the market yet, despite its listing on multiple services. After a candid conversation with the sellers about their experience, the Robinsons were invited to tour the home privately on Monday morning. They immediately fell in love with the property and its panoramic lake views. For the final element of their strategy, Zoe suggested creating a presentation about their family. "She keeps acting like we won't fit in, like we're not Oakwood Heights." "Material," Zoe explained. "Let's show her exactly who we are." Working late into the night, Zoe created a professional slideshow highlighting her parents' accomplishments. James's groundbreaking surgical techniques featured in medical journals, Melissa's patents and business leadership awards, their philanthropic work in Chicago, and even Zoe's own academic achievements and community service. On Monday morning, the Robinsons requested a meeting at Caroline's office, explaining they had made a decision about their home search. Caroline, likely anticipating they were giving up on the premium neighborhoods, readily agreed. As they dressed for the meeting, there was a shared sense of purpose among the family. This wasn't just about finding a home anymore. It was about challenging the subtle discrimination that persisted despite all their achievements. "Ready?" James asked, as they prepared to leave the hotel. Melissa nodded, her expression resolved. "She has no idea who she's been dealing with." Zoe tucked her presentation tablet under her arm. "Let's go educate Miss Bennett." Caroline Bennett's office was a testament to success. Awards lined the walls. Photographs of multi-million-dollar properties served as artful decoration, and a large window offered a commanding view of Oakwood Heights' most prestigious streets. She greeted the Robinsons with what had become her typical demeanor toward them, professionally cordial but subtly dismissive. "Have you had a chance to consider the Maple Street property?" Caroline asked as they settled into the chairs across from her desk. "I really think it offers the best value for your situation." James smiled politely. "Actually, we wanted to discuss some other properties first. Specifically, the contemporary home on Willow Avenue and the lakefront property on Lakeshore Drive." Caroline's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "As I mentioned, Willow Avenue went under contract last week, and the Lakeshore property isn't officially on the market yet." "That's interesting," Melissa replied evenly. "Because we spoke with the listing agent for Willow Avenue yesterday. The property is very much available, and the Lakeshore Drive owners gave us a private tour this morning." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Caroline shifted in her seat, adjusting papers on her desk that didn't need adjusting. "There must have been some miscommunication," she finally said. "But I have to be honest with you. I'm trying to help you find a neighborhood where you'll be comfortable. Some of these more established areas can be less welcoming to new types of residents. I'm just being realistic about where you'll fit in." James nodded thoughtfully, as if considering her words. "I appreciate your concern, but before we continue this conversation, I think we should clarify our financial situation." He reached into his briefcase and removed a leather portfolio, placing it gently on Caroline's desk. "This might help you understand our parameters better." Caroline opened the portfolio with visible reluctance. Inside was a comprehensive financial dossier. Bank statements showing accounts with seven-figure balances, investment portfolios diversified across tech, medical, and real estate sectors, 401ks and IRAs totaling over $2 million, and perfect credit scores for both James and Melissa. As you can see, Melissa explained as Caroline flipped through the pages with increasingly widened eyes, our net worth currently stands at approximately $8.5 million. My position as Chief Innovation Officer at Nexus Technologies, a Fortune 500 company, includes substantial stock options that vest quarterly. James's new contract with Oakwood Medical Center places him among the highest-paid surgical specialists in the country. Caroline's complexion had taken on an ashen quality. She stared at the documents, then at the Robinsons, then back at the documents. Our actual housing budget, James continued calmly, is $3 million, not the $1.2 million you've been using as a ceiling for our search. We've been quite clear about this from the beginning. Caroline opened her mouth, then closed it again, visibly struggling to formulate a response. Zoe, who had been quiet until now, pulled out her tablet. Ms. Bennett, I made a presentation about our family. Maybe it will help you understand who we are and why we chose Oakwood Heights. Without waiting for permission, she connected her tablet to the office's display screen. The presentation was impressively professional. Slides showcased James performing a revolutionary surgical procedure that had been featured in the New England Journal of Medicine. Melissa at a tech conference, giving a keynote speech to thousands. Both parents received community leadership awards. Zoe's academic achievements and volunteer work establishing a STEM program for underserved middle school students in Chicago. We've also already discussed price with the Lakeshore Drive sellers, Melissa added as the presentation concluded. They've indicated they're willing to accept our offer of $285 million. We were hoping you could help with the paperwork, but we're prepared to proceed with or without your assistance. Caroline's professional facade crumbled as the reality of the situation dawned on her. She had systematically steered away clients who could have purchased any property in her portfolio, who represented exactly the high-end buyers she typically boasted about representing. There's clearly been a misunderstanding about your budget, she stammered, attempting to regain composure. If you had been more explicit about your financial situation from the beginning. We were explicit, James interrupted, his tone still measured but with an unmistakable edge. We stated our budget clearly in our initial phone call and in every subsequent conversation. We have the emails to prove it. Melissa opened a folder containing printed emails and text messages. But that's not the only issue here, is it, Ms. Bennett? We've documented a pattern of behavior that goes beyond miscommunication. She produced a recording device. This is a conversation between you and Dr. William Chen from yesterday morning. Dr. Chen is a colleague of James who contacted you inquiring about the exact same properties with the exact same budget and timeline that we specified. She pressed play. Caroline's voice filled the room, enthusiastically describing the Willow Avenue property. The same one she had repeatedly told the Robinsons was unavailable. It's absolutely stunning, Dr. Chen. I'd be happy to show it to you this afternoon. If you're available, it won't last long at this price point. James leaned forward, his eyes locked with Caroline's. This isn't about miscommunication, Ms. Bennett. This is about you making assumptions about what we could afford based on the color of our skin. This is about you deciding which neighborhoods we belong in without knowing anything about us except how we look. His voice remained calm, but carried the weight of a lifetime of similar experiences. Do you know what it's like to achieve everything society tells you to achieve? The education, the career success, the financial stability, and still be judged as somehow less? To constantly have to prove your worth in spaces where others are given the benefit of the doubt? The door to the inner office opened, and an older man in an expensive suit appeared. Robert Phillips, the broker-owner of Prestige Properties, had apparently been listening. "Caroline," he said, his expression grave. "My office, please." "Mr. Phillips," Melissa acknowledged. "We're not here to destroy Ms. Bennett's career or to file a formal complaint against your agency, although we certainly could. What we want is accountability and systemic change." Caroline, now visibly distressed, began a defensive response. "They never clearly indicated—" "Stop!" Phillips interrupted sharply. "I heard everything. I've seen the documentation." Caroline fell silent, the full weight of her actions settling upon her. For perhaps the first time, she was forced to confront the biases that had guided her behavior, biases she had likely never acknowledged even to herself. In the silence that followed, Zoe spoke up. Her voice was younger than her parents', but carried no less conviction. "Ms. Bennett, do you know what it's like to have adults decide what you deserve before they know anything about you? To have someone look at your family and assume you don't belong in certain neighborhoods or certain schools?" Her composure slipped slightly, revealing the hurt beneath. "I was excited about moving here, about making new friends, but now I'm wondering if everyone is going to look at me the way you did, like I need to prove I deserve to be here." Phillips turned to the Robinsons, genuine distress evident in his expression. "I want to personally apologize for your experience. This is not how we conduct business, and it's certainly not consistent with our values. What can we do to make this right?" The question hung in the air, a rare moment where those who had faced discrimination were being asked to guide the path toward resolution rather than simply accept hollow. "We're not interested in lawsuits or public humiliation," James explained, as he sat across from Robert Phillips in the broker's private office. Caroline sat quietly in the corner, her usual confidence replaced by visible discomfort. "What happened to us happens to black families every day, but most don't have the resources or evidence to prove it." Melissa nodded in agreement. "What we want is meaningful change, not just for us, but for every family that comes after us." The Robinsons presented a thoughtfully crafted proposal. Prestige Properties would implement comprehensive bias training for all agents, establish new policies for client interactions, and commit to transparent reporting of sales demographics across neighborhoods. Additionally, Melissa continued, we recommend introducing a blind initial consultation process. Financial qualifications should be reviewed before in-person meetings to ensure clients are shown properties based on their budget and preferences, not assumptions about who they are. Phillips, to his credit, listened intently. "These are excellent recommendations. I'm ashamed this happened under my watch, and I'm committed to addressing it." He turned to Caroline. "As for immediate consequences, you'll be required to work with a diversity counselor, and you're suspended from solo client interactions for the next 3 months. Caroline nodded, her expression a complex mixture of embarrassment, defensiveness, and the dawning realization of her actions' impact. "Mr. Phillips," Zoe spoke up, "this isn't just about punishment. It's about learning and changing." Phillips smiled at the teenager's wisdom. "You're absolutely right." He turned to Melissa. "Would you consider leading a workshop for our agents about unconscious bias in housing? Your perspective would be invaluable." "I'd be willing to do that," Melissa agreed, recognizing the opportunity to create a more widespread impact. The story might have ended there, contained within the walls of Prestige Properties. But a local business reporter who had been investigating housing discrimination caught wind of the incident. With the Robinsons' permission, she published a thoughtful piece that didn't name Caroline specifically, but outlined the systematic issues in real estate practices. The article prompted several other agencies in the region to examine their own policies. Meanwhile, the sellers of 142 Lakeshore Drive, impressed by the Robinsons' handling of the situation, enthusiastically accepted their offer. "We're looking forward to having neighbors with such integrity," they told James during the final walkthrough. For Caroline, the coming weeks were challenging but transformative. Initially defensive during her first sessions with the diversity counselor, she gradually began to recognize patterns in her thinking she had never before acknowledged. "I didn't think of myself as racist," she admitted during a particularly difficult session. "I kept telling myself I was just helping people find communities where they'd be comfortable." "That's the insidious nature of bias," the counselor explained. "It disguises itself as helpfulness or practicality, but ultimately it's about making decisions for others based on our assumptions about who they are and where they belong." It was the beginning of a difficult but necessary journey, one that would ultimately transform not just Caroline's professional practices, but her understanding of her role in perpetuating housing discrimination. 6 months later, the Robinsons' home on Lakeshore Drive glowed with warmth and laughter as guests arrived for their housewarming party. The sprawling contemporary home with its wall of windows overlooking the lake provided a stunning backdrop for the gathering that included hospital colleagues, neighbors, community leaders, and even several real estate professionals. "Your home is absolutely beautiful," commented Catherine Edwards, a neighbor who had initially been cool toward the family, but had warmed considerably after James helped her husband during a medical emergency. "I'm so glad you found your way to Oakwood Heights." Zoe moved confidently among the guests, introducing her new friends from Lakeside Academy, where she had not only excelled academically but had established a diversity alliance that was already making waves in the previously homogeneous school culture. "My daughter says your club has been the highlight of her year," one mother told Zoe. "She never realized how limited her perspective was until your discussions." Near the entrance, Melissa greeted a latecomer, Caroline Bennett, who stood hesitantly at the threshold, holding a houseplant. "Thank you for coming," Melissa said, genuinely appreciating the courage it must have taken. Caroline had completed her bias training and was gradually rebuilding her professional reputation, this time on a foundation of genuine integrity. "I wanted to apologize again in person," she said quietly, "and to let you know that the changes you proposed have been fully implemented at Prestige. We've already seen a difference in our practices and our client outcomes. Indeed, in the months following the incident, Prestige Properties had become something of a model for other agencies. Their blind consultation process had revealed financial qualifications that agents had previously overlooked or dismissed, leading to more diverse sales in Oakwood Heights premium neighborhoods. James and Melissa had embraced their new community, while also using their experience to advocate for fair housing. James had joined the hospital's diversity committee, while Melissa had participated in a panel discussion on housing discrimination that drew attendance from real estate professionals across the state. The most powerful tool against discrimination isn't anger or even legal action, James told a colleague as they looked out over the gathering. It's confronting it with dignity, evidence, and a clear path forward, making it impossible to deny, but also possible to change. As the evening drew to a close, the Robinsons stood together on their lakeside terrace, taking in the community they had fought to join, and were now helping to transform. 3 weeks later, Caroline sat across from the Washingtons, a black family, relocating from Atlanta for a position at the university. She carefully reviewed their financial qualifications before their meeting, prepared a portfolio of homes across all neighborhoods that matched their specifications, and greeted them with genuine professionalism when they arrived. "We're interested in the lakeside area," Dr. Washington mentioned, watching Caroline carefully, having heard stories from other families. "You have excellent taste," Caroline replied without hesitation. "I have 3 properties there that match your criteria perfectly. The first showing is at 2 p.m., if that works for your schedule." As she drove the Washingtons to view their first potential home in Oakwood Heights' most prestigious neighborhood, Caroline reflected on how much had changed in her practices, in her thinking, and in the community itself. One family's refusal to accept discrimination had created ripples that continued to expand, challenging long-established patterns and opening doors that had previously been firmly closed. The Robinsons' legacy in Oakwood Heights would extend far beyond their impressive home on Lakeshore Drive. They had demonstrated that confronting discrimination with dignity and evidence could lead to meaningful change, not just for themselves, but for an entire community.